Well, this is my first time to Moscow, and very happy to be here on. Thank you. Very happy to be here on such a warm summer day. Look, I was on my way from the airport to the city, and I learned a word. It's not my first Russian word, because I had a Russian girlfriend in college. We'll talk about that later. But probki. And I experienced it in real life on my way here. What happened to the slides? Are they not happening? Whoa, hey, that's not it. All right. So what I'm here to talk about actually is how we can get less propky with more butts and fewer cars, fewer seats. And what it means is using cars more efficiently. I call it the future of human-driven transportation. And we're going to do this with the technology that is in our pockets, right? And I'm talking about a smartphone, not self-driving cars, though of course self-driving cars are going to be amazing. We can do so much for our cities with just this. So, a little bit of history. There we go. This is a romantic picture of me and my co-founder in front of the Eiffel Tower. It is right after we had started talking about the idea for Uber. My co-founder said, I want to push a button and get a ride. And anybody who's been to Paris knows, especially before Uber, it's late at night in that city, you are walking, for sure. And so it was a very simple idea, and at the beginning it was really it was a side project. It was for my friends, and it was for my 100 friends and us, and we could push a button back in San Francisco where it's also hard to get a ride, and a car would appear. And this is what the app generally looks like, and it was just a very simple idea. We didn't realize until very recently, last couple years, that it was more than just about pushing a button and getting a ride, that actually there was a big problem to tackle. Once we had tens of millions of people on the system, there was a much bigger thing we could do for cities. But it started with the fact that there are 1 billion cars in the world today. 1 billion. And how do all those cars get there? Well, everybody says, Americans love their cars, and in many ways, the big car revolution started in the US, but it's not just about Americans and their love of cars. Europeans love their cars too. Muscovites love their cars, and Russians love their cars. There are 600 new cars being added to Moscow's streets every day. And so with all these cars on the road, there's actually quite a large public cost. There's a huge cost to this. And we know this because we all sit in Propki every day. In Moscow, the average daily commute, folks who are commuting to and from work, 1.5 hours each way. Imagine if somebody could give you 3 hours a day back. Just give it back to you. Imagine if there was a magical 8th day a week because there was no more traffic. That's a public cost. In Russia, 7% of economic GDP is lost just sitting in traffic with people who are just sitting in, I keep saying propki, I don't even know if I've got it quite right, but you know what I mean. 4.5 trillion rubles per year. And those cars are responsible for 12% of the CO2 emissions. So the pollution that is warming the earth, causing climate change, 12% of it's coming from these cars sitting in traffic. But that public cost is only 4% of the problem. Because you're sitting in your car, well, the average person is sitting in their car 4% of the day. 96% of the time, that car is sitting idle. We store these hunks of metal in our cities, and it takes up between 15 and up to 30% of the land is used to store cars. There are even skyscrapers for cars. Now, mayors around the world, and of course here in Moscow as well, have dealt with this growing traffic problem. It's called mass transit. Subways, buses, trains, etc. This is how mayors have tried to solve this problem. They've spent billions of dollars US trying to solve it, but why do we still have a traffic problem? Certainly mass transit here in Moscow has gotten better over the years, but we still have a huge amount of traffic. Why? Well, it's because mass transit can't get to everybody's doorstep. And so if you look at a city like London, you know, in the middle of the city, you've got pretty good mass transit, but what about in the outer parts of the city, what are called the outer boroughs? In London, where obviously we have a very big business, 30% of the rides in the outer part of the city begin or end at a mass transit station. That's because people are using Uber to get the last mile, is to extend the reach of mass transit. In Paris, 10% of our rides begin or end in what is known as an underprivileged zone, an area that has low economic income and generally underserved by transportation. And by the way, most of the time, the places that are most underprivileged are also least served by transportation systems. And of course, there's nightlife. Well, this is a graph of Uber's traffic in a number of cities. And you see the peak is in the evening, right around midnight. And you can see that, well, guess what? At midnight, that is when mass transit is not usually working, is not usually operational. And so Uber sees a huge spike in traffic during those times. And so we are serving people, helping those cities move when there is no mass transit option. Of course, that's very good for reducing drunk driving incidents. It's very good for making the streets much safer. But the key is that we still have these cars, right? I push a button, I get in a car, and maybe I'm not driving, and that's really nice. And maybe we're not storing those cars, which gives land back to the city. We can reclaim that land. But I'm still getting in a car, and if a bunch of people are doing that, we're still going to have traffic. How can we use private cars as an almost public good? And so in San Francisco, we asked the question, well, we're getting so popular, we asked the question, were there multiple people pushing a button and getting a ride at the same time and actually getting the same ride at the same time? Imagine if you could push a button and the car came just like before. You open the door, but there's somebody else already in the car because two people were taking the same trip, almost the same trip at almost exactly the same time. Well, it was a big question we asked because if we could do that, if that worked, you would still have the convenience that people are used to with Uber, but you could bring the price down by 50% because it's a shared ride. And you can also make that transportation, instead of two cars, two people in two separate cars, you have one car with two people in it. And now you're literally taking cars off the road. Now you're literally taking traffic off the streets and giving time back to the people, giving cleaner air back to the people. And so we tried it, and we didn't know it was going to work, but it did. And it was pretty remarkable, some of the effects. So on the left-hand side is San Francisco when we did not have Uber Pool. This is Uber's traffic in San Francisco. The brighter lights is when the most traffic was happening. or where the most traffic was happening. On the right is when we introduced Uber Pool. And we literally had more customers on the road with fewer cars moving them. And today, 40% of all of our trips in San Francisco are Uber Pool trips. And so in Los Angeles, which is my hometown, a city that loves cars, if you took all of the time that I sat sitting in traffic, it's literally years of my life in a car. In the first 8 months that we rolled out Uber Pool, we've taken 7.9 million miles and taken them off the road, fewer miles driven. And 1.4 thousand metric tons of CO2 have been saved. In China, where everything is supersized, we have over 30 million Uber Pool trips a month. That should say 1 million Uber Pool trips per day. So we're doing this at mass scale, and what does that look like at scale? Well, we have worldwide over 18 cities where 100,000 people Uber Pool every week. Those are individual people doing multiple trips on Uber Pool. And so we can go to a mayor and we can say, within months of us rolling out Uber Pool, we will literally convert hundreds of thousands of people onto this system where they're sharing a car with multiple people and helping to reduce traffic. Today, across Uber, globally, 20% of our trips are Uber Pool trips. They're shared trips. And so this is not a picture of a Moscow suburb. This is actually a picture of my home where I grew up in Los Angeles. When I grew up, what happened in the morning is these cars, right? You see those mailboxes, they go on forever. But these cars would all pull out at the same time, and everybody would go to work all in their car individually, one person in each car. And in many of these houses, you'd have 2 or 3 cars, 2 or 3 people pulling out of that driveway in the morning. And many of them, of course, were going to the same place, but there is no way to sort of technologically coordinate that activity and make it convenient to carpool. Right? Carpooling is not a new idea. It's an old idea that never quite worked because there were 2 big issues. One was, how do we coordinate them in a convenient way? How do we identify different people that are leaving at the same time, going to the same place? And then also, of course, what is the incentive to pick your neighbor up on the way to work? Especially if your neighbor might be a little irritable in the morning. So the idea is, what if you could make your coffee, get in the car, open up an app, and while you're on your way to work, become an Uber driver? And pick up a neighbor, serve your city, pick up a neighbor on your way in to work. Again, the issue is coordination and technology. Sorry, is technology, which we now have, but also then there's the incentive. And in many cities around the world, including here in Russia, it's fine to take a friend where they want to go on your way to work, but you can't do it at a profit. There isn't the right incentive to do it. And so carpooling hasn't become a big thing because of it. And so what we're obviously working very hard on at Uber is how to turn our cities into greener cities, how to help to build the cities of the future by taking cars off the road, by reducing the cost of transportation, taking pollution out of the air, and giving people their time back and allowing us to, and also giving 20 to 30% of the land back to the city so we can reclaim our cities. And this is where we are pushing at Uber and succeeding so far. We still have a long way to go. But it's not just us. We do this with cities. And we work together with government officials, but with communities who care about transportation and who care about these types of issues and care about how do we turn these private cars, which are a problem, and turn them into a public good. So thank you very much. I appreciate your warm welcome and very excited to spend the next couple days here in Moscow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have a few chairs, so we have a long Q&A sessions, I hope.
All right.
And guys, I have 2 rules. So first one will be, we have a lot of questions at short of time. If you can speak English, please do. And if you can, maybe your friends could help us. So that's how we can manage much more questions. And the second thing, so this is the first trip, if I'm right, to Russia that you have, like publicly, right?
Yes. Oh, it's my first trip to Russia.
That's great. So guys, so it's hard to, how many hours have you been already? Like
I have been in Moscow for 3 hours.
So,
Woo!
you know, the questions about like, what do you think of Russia? I think that's not really maybe, common. We can use that for some really good jokes. So about your girlfriend.
Oh, no, you can ask me. Oh, I've got good stuff. Like, because my girlfriend's dad, every time I'd come, he'd put down shots of vodka.
Oh.
And then teach me Russian words.
Okay, Propki was one of them.
Well, that wasn't one that he taught me. I don't think I can say publicly the words that he taught me.
Okay, so we're pretty familiar with that kind of words. So, guys, may I, as a stalker, we can ask you a first question.
Sure.
Like, it still seems that Uber is a startup, the biggest, the richest, the interesting one of the world. So, is it a final goal? Is it like a final goal that can be material for you, or it's some big idea inside that you want to achieve, except the whole big, great mission about that?
Well, look, I think there is almost contradictory terms there, which is startup, but then the biggest and the richest. Usually startups are the smallest and the poorest. And my experience as an entrepreneur, Uber is not my first company, it's my 4th. And most of my time as an entrepreneur has been small and poor. So, but there's something magical about when it's small and when you're poor, and when you have an idea that you believe in that nobody else does. And so it's that feeling of creating something that everybody thinks is impossible. It's that feeling of the magic that you might be able to bring to the world that we try to keep as an enduring thing at Uber. But being small, feeling small, means moving fast. Feeling small means taking risk. Feeling small means being passionate about what you do and having a purpose that's bigger than yourself. And so in many ways, for us, it's not about big and it's not about rich. I haven't sold a single share. But it's really about the possibilities, it's about the purpose, and it's about the love of solving hard problems every day.
Thank you. And can I ask you, audience, personal questions? It took me 2 years to make a habit to put one button on my screen and get the Uber. Who else does it and in such kind of time? Can you raise the hand?
All right, we still... That's
okay,
pretty good.
It's like 50%.
I still got work to do here.
You see?
I'm going to give out a free promo code at the end of this.
So what about the habits? Because it seems unbelievable that somebody can change the habit in a couple of years. No. When you started, do you think about that things, or just, take it organically or something?
Well, look, I felt that myself when we first launched in Los Angeles, my hometown, where people love cars. When we launched, we had this big launch event, nice party, Hollywood people were there, and I had no idea whether it was going to work. How do you take people who love their cars and get them out of their cars and get them sharing cars? It wasn't clear that that would happen, but you try. It just turns out that actually sitting behind this round wheel and holding on to it while you're stuck in traffic happens to be a stressful thing that nobody actually really likes. So you can love a car, but you don't like sitting in traffic. And so cities have been...
Oh?
Hello. Okay.
Sorry.
Cities have been so underserved when it comes to transportation that something that is remarkably better, really convenient, and quite inexpensive tends to do very well, and that's what we've seen in cities around the world.
Thank you. So are we going to the questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, the first one, we have it. You can try to talk and then it can work.
Hello.
Hey.
My name is Artyom. I'm from Official Daily. So my question is, I know you raised about $3.5 billion last week.
Yes.
So it's huge sum of money. What are your plans for spending that? It's the biggest investment in venture capital.
We are not going to Las Vegas.
Okay.
Look, I think what we found is that the opportunity is quite large around the world, right? The amount that people spend on transportation is somewhere around $5 trillion, $6 trillion around the world. And literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of people who want to move around their cities more efficiently, right? Just like there are billions of people that use social networks and use the internet, there are people, those same people also want to get around their cities and they want to get around their cities more efficiently. So the opportunity is big, and we also have competitors that are raising a lot of money too, and so in many ways it's about serving as many people as you can as quickly as possible, and that's a big part of what that funding is about.
Okay.
So you want to add something?
Yes, I have a second question. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
We are not so generous about the questions today, but take your time.
Let's do it. What do you got?
Do you use Uber by yourself from your own account, from your own
Of course.
name?
Yes. Of
So
course.
you monitor the quality of the service?
Yeah, it's just also the most convenient way to get around.
Yeah, great. And can you name, please, some curious situations when you face to some bad service, or what do Travis Kalanick do when he faces to some crazy driver? Or
Well, what happens when I get in the car is about half the time the driver gets a little crazier. And so what happens is like he's either really nervous that I'm in the car, or he or she's very nervous. It could be so he's either very nervous that I'm in the car and they're like, and then they miss a turn or something like this, or the driver wants to talk business. Like, he's like, hey, I got this thing on the side. Can you give me a loan? And we'll have like 20 ideas for features, and the same thing will happen is the driver will then miss the turn. And really, I don't get to the office until we've cut some kind of deal. So there you go.
So have you ever traveled incognito in some country, maybe?
Say that again?
Have you ever traveled incognito in some country?
I mean, usually I just, light up the app and get around the city. So.
Okay. So we have a next question. Can we put it there? Okay, great. This one.
Hi, Travis. I'm Alona from Russian RBC. You generously written to us a column talking about how Uber pool can change the situation in Moscow, St. Petersburg. Yeah, thank you for that. And my question would be, your ambitious plan about Russia and changing traffic situation here, are they real? I mean, I know that to launch Uber pool, you have to collect enormous data on the rides, and Uber, honestly, is nowadays one of the smallest taxi apps. I'm sorry for that,
okay,
but we
okay.
have Yandex Taxi.
That's all right, that's all right.
So are you really going to launch it in the forthcoming future? I mean, this year, are you communicating with Russian officials in Moscow and St. Petersburg about that? Yeah. So how serious you are here in Russia? Yeah,
so I'll start with, Uber pool doesn't work until we have a certain number of rides happening. So if we're too small, you can't make it work because you don't have two people taking the same trip at the same time. But once you get above a certain level, then it starts to work. And the growth that we've seen, for instance, here in Moscow has been pretty profound, and it's something that we're going to get closer and closer to in the coming months, and that I'm pretty optimistic.
Coming months.
Coming months, yes.
So we should await Uber pool.
I didn't say how many months, but we're because I don't know exactly, but definitely less than a year.
Cool, thank you. And have another one question, more
Yeah.
global for Uber. You're always telling that you're not planning IPO in the coming years because you're small, you're growing fast, and you haven't sold your shares. But how do you expect your investors to earn? Because they're not selling, as far as I understand. Nobody has sold the shares?
There's no open market for our shares, correct? Yes.
Do they come to you and say, Uber, Travis,
I just
you do not
invested
earn
$3
money?
billion, where's my money?
Yeah.
Well, look, the first part is there's certainly investors. They put money in with an expectation of getting their money back.
Of course.
Right? So there's that. But also, remember, we have thousands of employees with a large part of their compensation is equity.
Oh, so employees are stakeholders.
Yeah, so I like to say that the day we IPO will be the day before my employees and their significant others come to the office with pitchforks and torches. And so what I mean by this, what I mean is that we have a moral obligation to the investors as well as especially to our employees for some kind of liquidity. And so that is ultimately where we have to go. But at the same time, I don't like the thought of people refreshing on, finance.google or, any one of the portals out there, like checking to see what the stock price is. And I don't like to think about all the bureaucracy that some of those things being public brings. And what it means is that you start to slow down. And what it means is you start to think about the short term versus the long term. And so at some point, you have to do something along those lines. You have to get liquidity for those people who invested and who put in a lot of time. But I'm going to make it as late as humanly possible. So.
Thank you. Can we have a question from that side, finally? Okay. Can we pass the microphone? Do you have? Guys, can we quick?
Hey.
Thank you. One?
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm Alexander Chepel, Multiple Systems, Estonia. I'm little unicorn.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
And you have had problems with investor communications.
I have?
And seed round and seed, pre-seed. And your first company, maybe not Uber.
So investor, here's the thing, right? So as an entrepreneur and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'll try. And if I don't get it right, we can have a little interaction here. As an entrepreneur that's had lots of small, poor companies, what you find is that investors often have lots of very interesting ideas for you. Most of those ideas are not really any good. That's why they're investors and not entrepreneurs. And so my sense is when it comes to investor communications, you want to make sure that you're giving them updates on what's going on, but you want to minimize that communication as much as possible. If that's viewed as an investor communication problem, like maybe, I think there's a balance to providing those updates so that they know what's going on with their investment. But as an entrepreneur, you got to stay focused on the problem and solving it. And if you get too caught up making others happy with the approach, you're not spending enough time finding the right approach.
Do you like to share the experience of entrepreneurship? Like, do you want to share with the young guys, or not inspire them, but explain the thing? Do you took time for that?
Well, between my last company and this one, I had 1.5 years where I was angel investing and where I was advising startups, right? And so that's all I did, and I love doing it. Be more than happy to do a more entrepreneurial type speech too. Because it's my true love, it's what I do. But yeah.
But is it true that you can learn the things, or you should be born like that?
Yeah, I think you can. I don't think anybody's born like at 1 year old and saying like, "Mommy, I want to sell lemonade." But I think there's a set of experiences you have in life that make you want to try things that are different. One of the things about being an entrepreneur is it's like you're always looking for the thing that everybody thinks is impossible, but that you think is possible. And so I like to say there's this as an entrepreneur, you have to understand the difference between perception and reality. Perception is conventional wisdom. It's what everybody thinks is true, what everybody thinks is the way. Now, sometimes it's right, but sometimes it's wrong. Knowing when it's wrong and saying perception is over here, but reality is over there, if you're right, the distance between reality and perception is what I call the Innovators Playground. And that is where all opportunity is found. And so if you want to think of like a future entrepreneur, it's that little boy or little girl who is always looking in a really clever way for where mommy or daddy is not quite telling exactly the way things are, right? Or is always debating with their parents, trying to figure out how they're right and mom and dad are wrong. That's an entrepreneur in residence, basically.
Great, thank you. We have a question from here, right? Nastya, which one?
Yes, hello. My name is Alina, and I'm from VC.ru. And my question is, Uber here have a really small share market, and how are you going to capture Russian market, especially in regions where vast majority of driving services are illegal drivers?
Well, look, I think we work, well, first, if you take a friend across town, it's totally legal, right?
Yeah.
Totally legal. But if you do it for money, all of a sudden you became a criminal, right? In certain cities around the world, that's a thing.
We're familiar with the topic, yeah,
Yes.
in Russia. Mm-hmm.
Why? Why? It's because there are industries that exist in transportation where they've over time found a way to protect and to outlaw competition. But competition is good for the consumer. And what I like to say is the company or service that serves the customers best gets most of the customers. And so our job is to serve customers with the best service around, and ultimately we will get most of the customers. And that is our focus. And in terms of how you bring that change to cities, I like to say that these old rules that we have, let's say around taxis, these old rules that we have around taxis, they were once the new and controversial rules. There was a time when those old rules were fresh ink on paper, and they were new and controversial, and now what I like to say is every new rule has the right and the privilege to become an old rule, and to ultimately get replaced by a new rule, as long as that new rule bends towards the people and towards progress. And so we're allowed to have new rules. It's okay, it's how the world progresses. And we work with city governments, city officials around the world to figure out what those new rules should be so that we can create tens of thousands of jobs in a city. We can reduce congestion, reduce pollution, reduce drunk driving, and make the city accessible not just to the wealthy, but to everybody. And we think that's a good thing. And so let's make sure the new rules bend towards that future.
Thank you. And I have a second question. Uber has been judged here for positioning itself as not as a transporting company, but only as an agent between drivers and users. So it means that Uber is not responsible for some accident may occur. So I want to know how are you going to solve this problem?
Well, I think that's a bit of a misperception, right? Is that, trust me, Uber is responsible, right? And all of those rides are insured. I mean, the only way you can serve customers and serve them best is to make sure that you provide for a system that's safe at the outset, and if, God forbid, something does happen, that things are taken care of quickly and efficiently on the other side. And so we most definitely take that as our responsibility, and that liability is ours, and it's sort of assumed by us.
Thank you. Can we have other question? Is it a journalist question? Can we just switch one more, not from journalists? Can we do that? Like, can we, let's say, this young lady, she's really want that, okay? Be quick, just short, okay?
So I have a corresponding question.
Guys,
yes,
can we switch?
I'm starting repeating. Sorry for that. So Uber drivers get the income from the drive, yes, and city government, complain with you that they don't pay taxes on this income usually.
What you can provide instead, you mean?
How do you think this problem can be resolved with the taxes on this income?
So our first cultural value at Uber is what we call celebrate the cities, which means that everything we do at Uber is to make cities better. And of course, that's the transportation system and all the things I just talked about. But you know what? Paying taxes is part of that, right? Now, think about a taxi system. How do taxis normally get paid? Cash. How much of that do you think that they claim on their taxes? Something close to that, okay? All Uber trips are paid for digitally, right? It's paid by credit card, and then the drivers get paid into their bank account. It's very obvious who got paid what. And we work with governments around the world to make sure that the drivers on the system who get an income also pay their taxes. Now remember, on top of it, it's not just that they're paying taxes on the fares that they make, which is a big difference between the taxi world, but also there's VAT on top of that, right? There's sales tax and VAT taxes on top of that that also get paid. Remember, this is all digital. There's nowhere to hide, and that's good. And that's part of also how we celebrate the city. So I think on the taxes side of things, we feel very good about what Uber brings to a city. We take a system that's mostly off the grid to one that is on the grid, one where taxes aren't getting paid to one where they are. And we feel very good about that. And happy to partner with city governments around the world and here to make sure that happens. But it's very easy and straightforward.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Igor. I'm the investment director at Inventure Partners. We're an investor in one of your competitors, Get, formerly Get Taxi. So, recently you raised $3.5 billion. Our portfolio company just got $300 million from Volkswagen. Yep. And, there is this state of perpetual fundraising in the sector.
It's painful.
One thing, the Chinese with Didi, they're obviously forming global alliances to fight Uber. Obviously, you have a lot of cash now. Do you see that there will be a consolidation in the sector? That's one question. And is it actually a good time now to consolidate the sector so that, the companies across the board stop burning so much money by subsidizing rides? And second part of
that is coming from the investor. There's an interest there. I understand. Okay, go ahead.
And the second question which I wanted to ask is about your vision for the future. Obviously, there is a lot of speculation that we're going for the future with the driverless cars. I just wanted to ask personally, what is going to happen with all these drivers when we lay them off? Thank you.
Okay. So first, in terms of consolidation, it's not something we've seen a lot of in our space. But the reason so much money is going in is because of two things. One, the opportunity is huge. And two, there's a lot of money on the sidelines pushing up valuations and putting lots of dollars to work. Whether there's a consolidation or not, I can't say, but if it's cheaper to compete than it is to purchase, then people will continue to compete. And the valuations have gotten to a place where I think in many cases competition is just cheaper. So that's on part one. Part two, on the driverless piece. Look, Google has been working on driverless since, 2007, 2008, almost 10 years. And there's a reason for it. 1 million people die every year, needlessly, senselessly, because they're in a vehicle and it gets in an accident. 1 million people, right? If you think about all the other things we worry about and all the other headlines that are on the newspapers, nothing compares to 1 million people a year, I promise. And then you think of the tens of millions of people that are injured. Broken bones, getting maimed, getting paralyzed, things like this. It's a big problem. And then you think about, well, these cars not only can be way safer, they can also be incredibly more efficient in the use of roads. And in doing so, they're going to be doing a great job in giving that time back to the people. Now, in terms of, so that is why. And so that progress is inevitable. There are technology companies working on it. It's not just Google, it's Apple, it's Tesla. It's every manufacturer out there is working on it. So these things are going to happen. And you ask these questions like, remember when telephones first came out and there was an operator who plugged it in when you made a phone call. There was somebody who literally was at a switchboard plugging it in. What happened when it became digital? Well, the world became a better place. The world became wealthier because of it. And a whole new set of jobs were created. I like to say, what happened to the guys who build phone booths? What happened to those guys? Right? So the point is that I'm an optimist when it comes to the future, is that who would have guessed 6 years ago, so Uber's 6 years old, who would have guessed 6 years ago that Uber would be creating millions of jobs a year around the world? And, well, what are the old technologies that are creating those those folks who are then moving to the new thing? That's normal. But also the thing about driverless is that ultimately you'll go from, one of our bigger cities might have 30,000 cars on a system. You'll go to having 500,000 cars on a system or 1 million cars on a system, because it will be far cheaper than owning a car, and folks will no longer own cars, they'll be using a service. And so it won't be so much that I think the human-driven transportation will be going down dramatically. It's that the sort of driverless car transportation will start slowly, but then get much bigger. And over time, those drivers might find other ways of making a living. And I don't think it's going to be this thing that happens like this. It's going to happen over decades. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we have one here? Okay.
Hi, Travis. My name is Roman. Another self-driving car question here.
All right.
Right now, we have a model where most cars are personal cars, right? And in self-driving world, who is going to own the car? Individuals or?
I think it will.
Or services like Uber.
Yeah, I think. Look, it's not clear. It's not clear whether the services like Uber will own cars or not. I'd really prefer not to. But somebody's got to own the car. So you could have situations where individuals own cars and they use those cars when they're using them, but then loan them to a service, right, when they're not using those cars. That's one model. Another model is large fleet managers that run tens of thousands of cars and maintain these cars, et cetera. Another model is that Uber somehow, or services like Uber, are somehow involved. And we don't know the answers to those questions just yet. But it will be maybe one of those three or a mix of those three.
Okay. We have one question here, and the girl with the, I don't know, blue something. Yulia, the girl on the behind, on the blue, and your question now. We have two last, so sorry guys. So who is here with the microphone? Great, thank you. And Yulia, can you pass the microphone there afterwards? Okay.
It's funny, this is like the coldest day in California. But you guys are like, woo,
You know, it's our summer. We have a swimming pool sometimes here like that.
Let's go swimming.
Cold here, man. Hello, Travis. Hello, everybody. My name is Anton. I'm from Maxim Magazine, Russia. And so the question I want to ask you is, a significant part of modern day transportation consists of cargo transportation, of freight transportation, which you cannot carpool.
Whoa. So I heard carbon transportation. Did you?
Cargo.
Cargo. Oh,
Cargo.
yeah. Yes.
You know, transferring goods.
Yes.
Which you cannot carpool.
I mean, you can. It's just goods sitting next to goods, but they're already doing that. So, yes.
So, do you see a revolution in cargo transportation? And if yes, how is it going to happen?
I do. I mean, driverless trucks is going to be a thing. That's one approach.
Okay.
Hyperloop is going to be a thing. That's another one. But imagine driverless trucks that are driving and there's only like 2 feet in between in the trucks as they're going down a highway. You can use space much better. They're going to be much safer. And you use much less energy, by the way, when they sort of sit behind each other like that. So it's trains, it's planes, it's automobiles, and it's things like Hyperloop, et cetera. I do believe there will be a revolution of sorts in moving things, even over long distances. And it'll be an interesting business for sure. It's already a huge industry worldwide.
Does Uber plan to intervene this sphere?
Are you doing a startup in this space?
Do you want to invest?
Maybe.
Hey, let's
Just
do it.
maybe.
Let's go. Look, I think the things that we're working hard on are the things you know about. There's some other things we work on, but we're kind of focused on the consumer side of things right now. Okay.
Thank
So we have a question.
By the way, we do move things for consumers. We do that.
Also, everybody knows that, like,
Man, come on. There's too many people. That's not fair.
I just want to ask, what's the rating of Travis on Uber as a user?
Oh, I'd have to check. Last time I checked, I was a 4.9.
Aww.
I was a 5.0 for a while. I don't know what happened. It's probably somebody I didn't want to talk business with.
Okay, we have really a last question. I know it's cold.
No, I could go for hours, but, you know.
Be spectacular, okay? Promise.
One question. Yes, hi. My name is Roman, and I'm running Uber for cleaning and Uber for manicure service here in Russia. Yes, and actually, I wonder if you can share with us your plans regarding, development of new verticals such as Uber for delivery or Uber for lunch delivery, or something like that you have launched in New York. And what is the reason of it, and what is your plans?
Well, look, I think there are a lot of things that people. There are some things that people want right now, right? I like to say that Uber is in the business of delivering cars in 5 minutes, but once you deliver cars in 5 minutes, there's a lot of things you can deliver in 5 minutes. But there's a lot of things that people don't want right now, and then the sort of 5-minute delivery is not as interesting. And that gives you a sense of how we think about the world and our strategic mindset. But we also know that Uber can't do everything, right? There is Uber for this and Uber for that, and 99% of the Uber for blank we don't do, and probably never will do. We do have an API. We do create a platform for certain folks who want to deliver certain things, and that will be expanding over time. But for the most part, we do very few things.
Thank you, Travis.
Yeah,
You inspired us so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's applause our guests.